Although we were much older than that, even in the pre-dynastic period, that would take us into easily 5000 BC, where the development of these ideas and concepts were already underway. But then as we move through the Old Kingdom and through the Middle Kingdom up to the New Kingdom, we've laid a perfect foundation that shows you, it proves to you without a doubt, that this was an African culture and civilization. And then we later get the Greeks at 1000 BC, and even at that point, they're coming into ancient Kemet as students based on what they say, or at least their historian, the first Greek historian, Herodotus, who comes on the scene 450 BC, and he talks about that the Greeks learned everything that they knew at the feet of the African. So before even the Greeks get to a point where they start claiming our spiritual systems as their own, it is already thoroughly documented that this comes out of an African reality. I saw my sister in the back.
I was hoping you wouldn't overshot my question. In the film there, it mentioned that Akhenaten versus Moses, and so it brings out the distortion there. You know, for one who may not know their history, or may not even follow that video carefully, would think that, oh yeah, you know, was it Moses or was it Akhenaten that described the Bible or whatever?
Yeah, well...
No, I'm just saying, in the film, the question was posed that, you know, Akhenaten versus Moses.
Right.
Right. But we know that Akhenaten was before Moses.
Right.
Right.
And,
so the film is giving a distortion.
Confusion.
Right. And pertaining to the historical
most assuredly, because we had already, you know, documented that, as we said earlier, very clearly. But his conclusion, and this is the naked archaeologist, you know, white guy that's on the History Channel and all of that, he gets shown all over the world. His conclusion, if we would have went to the end of the clip, his conclusion is that Moses predates Akhenaten. And that takes us back to what we were just saying. This is his story. This is their story. This is clearly their attempt, using modern media, to take our history from us and claim it as their own. And so then we have to, of course, marshal the evidence to the contrary, for those who would be interested in finding out wherein really lies the truth. I see my brother over here.
I think I just responded and following up on the same thing she was saying, I think, and everyone else. It's just, it seems like that this film is just another distortion of, again, what their history is all, they're talking, their story. And while I was watching it, I'm listening, and I'm thinking, well, there's nothing about me other than what I know to be true from the teachings that we do here. So yeah, this is just another distortion film, you know, to say, look, we're the ones.
Right,
but, right. My thing is how now you're going to help us bring that back into fold, you know, and that's what I'm waiting for, you know. But everyone else, I think that everyone here has the same. An agreement, you know.
Nah, man, y'all know white people different.
So that's what I've been waiting for, to see how you are going to articulate the situation and bring it back.
Okay, well, 2 points I want to make, and I'll come to the next hand before I forget these 2 points. One is that the name Moses, if we break it down in terms of linguistics, is an African name. You cannot find that name among European names. It does not exist. And we have seen clearly, based on the classes that we had earlier, that the name Moses pops up very often. Thutmose, Atmoses. That name runs throughout the pantheon of African pharaohs and is a part of the Egyptian culture. And then also, even in the Bible, as it refers to this concept of Moses, the Bible indicates very clearly that Moses was born where? In Egypt, and raised in the house of Pharaoh. So even within the mix of the lies, and this is the second point I wanted to raise, is that there's a kernel of truth there. as white people even attempt to lie and misrepresent your history, they got to use your history in order to do so. So they began to bring this whole concept and these ideas not to Rome, not to Greece, but where? To Africa. So you can see as they are having this discussion, they're going right into Egypt, they're going into the Egyptian tombs, they're looking at the statues and mirrors on the walls of African pharaohs, of Akhenaten and his wife, and what was going on in that particular period in history, although they got these white people who are not indigenous to that area at all. And they're trying to make you believe that they are, but of course the classes that we've already had shows very clearly that this is not the case. So the point is that even within their history, with their lies, they're using your information in order to misrepresent and document the lies that they're trying to tell. So as historians and social scientists, we have to also be able to look at white folks' stuff and find in wherein lies the truth. So we can get our stuff out of there, or at least find that kernel of truth that will lead us to do more research and at least be able to be conscious enough to pick up the differences in what they're showing in terms of the location and the images that they're actually showing before they start showing the Hollywood stuff. Now I saw another hand, my brother right here, and then I'll come back to you.
Again, how do I put this? I think the Bible pretty much teaches us that God Moses went to God and he put 10 plagues on Egypt, and that's how the people of Egypt was free. But I think when I was listening to that, they said the people hate the idea that he was trying to come up with Akhenaten, he was trying to come up with a monolithic God, and they think those people killed him. So I guess my question is, who killed who?
Okay, and of course that's an interesting question based on how the story is being unfolded, and we would definitely be archaeologists, social scientists, historians, all that together, as well as what do you call the people who study dead people? Somebody said politicians.
Politicians.
Politicians. I thought you said politicians.
Anthropologists.
Who reconstruct from old fossils.
No.
This is another word I'm looking for, but I think the point is still being made. Is to find wherein lies the truth. Also understanding that we're dealing with from where we are, something like that. Where we are right now, if we look back to the dividing line of AD and BC, we're already talking about 2012 years. And then we talked about 1340 BC in the BC time period. So you add that 1,300 years. Now we already 340 so years in time. And y'all know it's hard for us to find out what happened yesterday. But we're trying to go back 3,040 years. So that's going to require a lot of research and something that cannot be taken lightly. And on that path, we have to use African sources to get the more correct information. We cannot use white people's sources, because when we look at that particular time period, we can see very clearly that you got black cultures and civilizations that have been going on for thousands of years, but you do not have a Greece, you do not have a Rome yet in the time period that we're talking about. So if you don't have a Greece and you don't have a Rome, you definitely don't have Europeans. And so the period that we're talking about, there are no white people around that have any sense to be able to document or even raise the issues that we are discussing here today. Where do we put white people 3,400 years ago?
In Europe.
We have them definitely in Europe, and we have nomadic white tribes who are beginning to migrate from northern Europe into what would be called southern Europe today. They're on their way down. You got the Macedonians, you have the Etruscans, and other types of barbaric white groups who are basically, white folks refer to them as barbarians in their own history, trying to move down as their populations begin to expand based on the retreat of the last ice age. And as they're moving southward, they're coming in contact with other cultures and other people. So if we look at where they are in history at this time, you don't have no white people who are writing anything. You don't have white people who are building any kind of civilizations yet on this timeline that we're looking at right there. And so we need to be able to see that very clearly as we begin to move on. My brother,
just one more interesting thing. I was watching a basketball game yesterday. It was Miami Heat and I can't think of the other teams. The New York Knicks.
Yeah.
And plagiarism. And again, our history, right? As D. Wade makes this wonderful move, and he goes around this guy and he slams the ball. The announcer on TV, now if you're not really paying attention and not listening, you'll miss it. And he said, that was a great move by Dwayne Wade. That was a European step that he used. A European step. A black man using a European step.
Right, right.
There's no such thing as a European step. Because he made a move and stepped around him that we've been doing for years on the playground and probably everywhere else. But this man on TV, live TV yesterday, goes and says a European step.
So clearly, the point is the plagiarism claiming your history as their own, and at this point in a time period where you have no literate Europeans, matter of fact, you don't have even the concept of Europe at this point. And you don't have the Greeks until, like I said, at the end of this time period that we're talking about. And so we need to be clear on that particular point right there. Another point that came up and in that discussion as they're showing their story is they're talking about the relationship between some of the scriptures that were found among Akhenaten or associated with Akhenaten and what is written in palms in the Bible. Did anybody catch that?
Yeah, and that's why I don't understand when y'all say it's confusing, because I heard them contrast, and I heard considering the timeline, my conclusion is that it's more true that the history that we have than what they've been saying.
Yes. Now, as a part of the critique, what we're looking at is that in the Bible, whichever one that you may have, it generally has an area in there that has what they call the Psalms. And I think these were things that were supposed to have been created during the time of Solomon, who comes at the end of this time period that we're talking about. But based on what we saw in the video, you have the same scriptures already carved in stone in among Akhenaten's work. And so you predating the collection of the Bible, or the stories that comprise the Bibles, that the Greeks will do later on. So those are the kind of key things that you have to pick up. And then as we move forward, we're going to be able to show you that almost word for word, and the brother used the concept plagiarized, that white folk literally plagiarized, took right off of the temples, word for word, and put it into a book that they will later call the Bible, and give credence to somebody, that a fictitious person, or somebody that they're going to represent as a white person being the author of this particular work. Okay, my brother?
I just want to add to what he said. When Hillary Clinton said it takes a village, she was quoting the African proverb, it takes a village. And every time I would watch, when they would do their little campaign stuff, they would give her credit for it. Like some of the announcers would say, like Hillary Clinton quoted, it takes a village. Yeah. In other words, she gets credit for something that she stole. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, indeed. And it happens over and over again. And the bottom line again is that they cannot tell their story without referring to your story. Okay? So let us move on to the next clip. Are downloadable from YouTube. This one you're going to have to read along with a little bit. But make notes. Lights. So here again, we are continuing to pursue this connection between ancient Egypt and the area of ancient Palestine and the biblical story. So here again, many of the those who are associated with the patriarch Abraham, some of the top followers like Joseph and others are said very clearly in the Bible to have married these types of people. They have married Canaanites. We've already documented that the Canaanites were an African people. They have married Egyptians. We already documented that the original Egyptians were African people as well. And so the names that you see of many of these eponymous ancestors as it relates to the biblical story, based on who they chose as a wife, were African women. And so the idea here again, if they're moving from the area of the mouth of the Persian Gulf around Ur of Chaldees, where the Sumerian people laid the first culture and civilization, we already documented that the Sumerians were African people as well, and that there is a relationship between ancient Samaria or Mesopotamia, the highlands of Ethiopia, where the oldest black people or humans come from, and ancient Egypt. So Egypt, and when I say ancient Egypt, I'm including the area of the Levant, that is Palestine, Israel, all the way up to the borders of Turkey. So if you go from highlands of Ethiopia all the way down the Nile up to Egypt, where it enters into the Mediterranean, all the way on up that little strip on the side there, that is Israel or Jerusalem, up to Turkey, and then back down following the Tigris and the Euphrates River through Mesopotamia down to the Persian Gulf, and then cross back over to the highlands of Ethiopia. All the people in that particular triangle have indigenous people, have been African people, and that you have a cultural connection between all of those people. The ancient Ethiopians saying very clearly that we were the ones who colonized Jerusalem, the area of Jerusalem or the Levant. And also we sent colonies over to Samaria. And then there's a trade route going on between these three prominent black nations in ancient time. Not only that, but also a linguistic connection in terms of not only the languages and the language system, that's where we bring in our linguists or our study of languages, as well as the scripts that were first produced by these three different African populations. All are kin, and we looked at that about 2 weeks ago where we put the scripts up. On one side we had the Old Hebrew, which is supposed to be the oldest script that the biblical writings were written out of, Aramaic, as well as Phoenician or Canaanite scripts, and we agreed that all of those scripts look what? Identical. And so then we document, well, who else is writing in the ancient world at this time period? The Greeks are not writing yet. Okay, and of course they're the first Caucasoid quote-unquote civilization. So everybody who comes after them definitely are not writing yet. So when you put all those things together there, the relationships that are dictated in the Bible in terms of who these people marry, where they actually come from, the story that they are telling, which is being told over and over among African people in the same basic geographical area, and then you do not find those linkages among white people in Greece or Europe anywhere. No place do you find the foundation for the development of these moral or spiritual systems at this period of time. Let's go back at least as far as 1500 BC, and even as we move down to 1000 BC, where you will first have the Greeks beginning to form a civilized society and learning how to write. And based on what they said, they're talking about 700 and something when they the Canaanites gave them a BC, when the Canaanites gave them, or they called the Phoenicians, gave them a script for their own language. So they couldn't be writing before they even had a script. So when we look at all those contradictions there, we can see wherein lies the truth, and more specifically, wherein lies the big fat lie. Any questions about what we just showed before we move to the next clip? Those were some biblical connections there. Now, here again, whether you ascribe to this biblical story or not, as I said earlier, they can't attempt to tell an ancient story without telling whose story? Without telling your story. because they got nothing else to relate to or associate, their history to, because they don't have a history. Their history will take you at this time period. If they were true about their history, they would say very clearly, we were barbarians coming out of the last ice age in northern Europe, migrating southward toward, quote unquote, civilized, real civilized societies. That's where you would have to put them at the time period that we're talking about on the historical timeline. Any questions or contradictions toward where we are with that? We're on the same page? All right, let's move on to the next clip as we continue to build our case. There was some genetics here. The Y chromosome is passed on by whom? Females. So here we have people, ancient people in Africa, already practicing the ideas and concepts that will later be associated with Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And so when they come out like the Limba did and say, we are the people that came from that area. White folks want to say, well, if you're the people, they want to see the DNA evidence. And so when they did the DNA on the Limba, they found out that they had a closer relationship to that area than any white people who claim to be Jews. All right, let's look at a little bit more in terms of the text that we suggested, linguistics. So we're dealing with archaeology, we're dealing with
I'm
linguistics.
going to teach you how
now,
the evolution of the alphabets occurred, stemming from Proto-Sinaitic or Proto-Canaanite down to Phoenician, which is also known as...
Okay, now, Proto-Sinaitic, Proto-Canaanite, those concepts mean what? Proto means what? Before. Okay? So, instead of saying African, they just put a vague before. Mm-hmm. And so, when we put these concepts on a historical timeline, when we put Canaanites on the historical timeline, as we did last week, where we showed, based on archaeological evidence, that the Canaanite culture and civilization in the area of the Levant is documented to go back at least to 7,000 BC. 7,000 BC. Now, at 7,000 BC, you're talking about pre-Egypt in terms of the Old Kingdom. And of course, at that time period, you're talking about pre-everything for the most part. White folks are nowhere around. They're still in the caves, just standing right outside of the cave of Europe. They're nowhere to be talked about at this point in history. So if you say before the Canaanites, then you definitely don't have nothing but Africans around. Because you cannot come up with Europeans or white people, before the Canaanites, unless you're talking about the caveman, and that's who they were. And so let us not get mixed up when they start using these proto names, because what all they're saying is that we don't know much about that history prior to this time, or we don't want to talk about it. And in most cases, they don't want to talk about it because that's you that they would have to be talking about.
Exactly.
Now, we said that the Canaanites and the Phoenicians are one and the same people. Is that when the Greeks come into the area of Canaan, everywhere they went, they changed the name of stuff to a Greek name. And so they began to call the Canaanites the Phoenicians. And then there becomes a mixture as the Greek colonies began to set up along the coast of Canaan and come in trying to set up shop. So then you have some mixing going on among Caucasoid peoples, the Greeks, and then the Africoid Canaans right there at the coast. Ancient Hebrew, and so when they're talking about ancient Hebrew, or here again, based on the scripts that we're already seeing, they're talking about African people.
Ancient Hebrew, they're not exactly the same language, but they do have more or less the same characters. To the formation into...
Okay, now they're saying that this script among the Canaanites and this one right here are not the same, but they have the same what? Characters. So that's white folks, as the Indians or the native people in America would say, talking out of both sides of their neck.
The Greek characters, which made its way into forming the Latin or Roman characters, which is more or less equivalent to the English letters we have today. Now, we start off with Aleph, which means ox or ox head, which, as you can see, is representative as a picture, which straightened out and became more triangularized over time, until eventually it became the ancient Hebrew or Phoenician form, which we see currently here. It then became straightened out and pivoted till it became the Greek letter alpha, which is the A as we know it today. The next letter is Beit, which means bayit or house. This also became configured over time, again became pivoted to its form where it is in the ancient Hebrew language, as you see right now. Then it became flipped due to the fact that the Semitic languages were written from right to left, and Greek was written from left to right, so many of these letters were switched over time. This then developed a bottom, which became the beta in Greek, and then the letter B in English. The next letter we have is Gimel, which according to some means camel, although there are differs in explanation. It started off, as you can see, it already looks very similar to a gamma, became slightly modified to the ancient Hebrew form, then simply flipped to reach the gamma form in the Greek. And then we have two letters deriving from this. We have C, which simply is curving it with a bottom. And then we have G. We have a slightly variation. That is why it has G, the sound of gamma, or Gimel. However, it is in the place of the letter C in the alphabet. This C and G became in the forms that we know it today. The next, there...
Okay, so basically what we got going on here is that you have these early African scripts, and as they go through time and being passed down to other cultures, the cultures change and modify the script based on the way that they are learned to read, whether it's left to right or right to left. And so you start out with the earliest scripts, and you simply ask the question, who is responsible for these earliest scripts? And then that lets you know the first people who invented writing. And so when you ask that question, you always come back to African origins in terms of scripts, the ancient Hebrew script that is identical to the oldest script that they have found coming out of the highlands of Ethiopia. And so instead of saying ancient Ethiopian script, they just change the name on it and say ancient Hebrew script. And then as they move on, they move from Old Hebrew to Modern Hebrew, and at each step along the way, white folks are modifying and changing the script as they move forward. But had they not had the foundation for the scripts, then they would still be illiterate, because it was African people who were passing this knowledge on. And so that's the study of linguistics. The more we get into it, the clearer it becomes that this is the process that's going on.
The Old Hebrew alphabet, also called the Paleo-Hebrew,
Back that up just a hair. So here you are. You see all of these. This is the foundation for the ancient Hebrew script, which is, as I said to you earlier, the same letter style as the ancient Ethiopian script. And these are the letters that are changed and modified as they go down to the Greeks and then later the Romans, and they lay the foundation for what later would become A, B, C, and D, and all of that stuff. So it can clearly be documented when you go back and see where it's carved in stone at. The oldest places that you will find this type of writing will be nowhere in what is called Europe. But when you go into Africa, when you go up into the highlands of Ethiopia, you start finding these types of scripts in ancient writings carved in stone in places. Okay, let us check this one out, and then we'll come back for some discussion.
The goal of creating a homeland for Jews seemed like a noble pursuit in 1897 when the Zionist movement became officially established. However, their dream of returning to Palestine has become a nightmare of violence, and there is no end in sight. Worse yet, the concept that Palestine is their homeland has turned out to be a tragic mistake. These white-skinned Ashkenazi Jews are not descendants of the original Jews of Palestine. There were no white people in Africa or Palestine 2,000 years ago. The medieval Europeans...
Hold it, let me back that up. I want y'all to hear that part right here. That's what we were just saying.
That's what we've been wanting to hear too. No.
Are not descendants of the original Jew. Palestine is their homeland has turned out to be a tragic mistake. These white-skinned Ashkenazi Jews are not descendants of the original Jews of Palestine. There were no white people in Africa or Palestine 2,000 years ago.
Okay.
The medieval Europeans assumed that Jesus Christ, his mother, and the other original Jews looked just like the Europeans, which is why you can find Jesus with blue eyes and green eyes, and why his mother has such white skin. A Jewish historian looked into the ancestry of the Ashkenazi Jews and wrote the 13th tribe to show that their homeland is the area near the Caspian Sea.
Let me back this up a little
The
bit.
ancestry of the Ashkenazi Jews.
Show y'all something.
Ashkenazi Jews are not descendants of the original Jews of Palestine. There were no white people in Africa or Palestine 2,000 years ago. The medieval Europeans assumed that
Now I want you to watch this, even with these Caucasoid images. Around the heads of these deified figures, you're going to see that same sun disk that we were looking at a few video clips earlier that came from Akhenaten.
That's right.
Jesus Christ, his mother, and the other original...
See it here around the Christ child? And even up here around who's supposed to be Mary? That same sun disk. In other words, the concept of the sun disk comes from the people of the what? The sun. You're not going to have that concept in the ice and the snow. So we have to look because they're hiding the stuff
Jews
all over in
looked
front of
just
our
like the
faces.
Europeans,
See the
which is
sun
why you
disk
can
up
find
here?
Jesus with blue eyes and green eyes, and why his mother has such white skin. A Jewish historian looked into the ancestry of the Ashkenazi Jews and wrote the 13th tribe to show that their homeland is the area near the Caspian Sea. The main...
Okay, so let's stop right here. Let me take it back a little bit.
ignoring this information. Most of the alternative media is also ignoring it. Why you can find Jesus with blue eyes and green eyes, and why his mother has such white skin. A Jewish historian looked into the ancestry of the Ashkenazi Jews and wrote the 13th tribe to show that their home...
Okay, now looking at the map here again, this is modern day what?
Greece.
Somebody else? Turkey. This is modern day Turkey. And so this starts, this little strip right here would be the Levant, that little strip that connects from Turkey down to Egypt. And that's where Israel, Jerusalem, modern day Syria, Lebanon, all that goes down to Egypt there. Just to give you a geographical reference. Now this is where all of this spiritual activity is going on, and that's related to the Bible in terms of the story of Christians and Jews. And the people in this area, the indigenous people have always been African people. Their religion and influence began to influence people up into this area right here. Now, these set of mountains right here are called the what?
Caucasus.
These are the Caucasus Mountains. Okay, Caucasian, white folks coming out of the mountains. So having the the Khazars, group of white folks who had set up their culture on the other side of this mountain. Of course, this is the area over in here during the last ice age that was covered with a sheet of ice about a mile thick. And people got caught into that ice age. Most of them had to retreat into mountain caves in order to survive. And as the ice age began to wane, this is turned into plains, and they began to develop their cultures in this particular area right here. But they were heavily influenced by the religious beliefs coming out of this area right here, to the degree that the king of the Khazars over in this area began to adopt this spiritual concept to help civilize, his Caucasoid people in this area. And then they are later pushed out of this area by the Han as they go over into Europe, what is modern day Europe, France and Spain. But it starts out in this area right here.
Homeland is the area near the Caspian Sea. The mainstream media is ignoring this information. Most of the alternative media is also ignoring it. Your best source of information is the French Connection at IamTheWitness.com. Here are some excerpts from an interview about the 13th tribe.
One of the subjects that I have been actually pounding pretty hard on the radio about is this new book. Well, it's not a new book, but to me it was quite new. Most of these subjects are new to me. It's a book called The 13th Tribe by a man named Kostler, and it was written some time ago. However, it is still, to date, I think probably the strongest evidence we've got of some of the deceptions around, the Zionist camp, how they are going out into the airwaves and into the newspapers, creating false charges of anti-Semitism, causing people to believe that they are, in fact, the rightful heirs to Israel, and many other things. And so I've invited someone from Britain. His name is Mohammed Refik, and he has been involved in trying to get the truth out about this stuff for over a decade and a half, going on 2 decades now, which is amazing because, this is back in the day when nobody was talking about this, or very few people. And I think the first thing I'd like to start out with is how this Khazarian empire was born, because the listeners they already know that the Khazars are the forerunners to the Ashkenazi sect of Judaism. So, since you've done the study, where did the Khazar dynasty begin, and how did it get underway?
What actually happened was, somewhere between the 7th and 8th centuries of the Christian era, we find these Khazars who lived in the area which was named after them, Khazaria, which is the land locked between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. The northern border of this land is actually the third range of mountains. If you were to start heading north from the south, you'll find there's actually 3 ranges of mountains, and the third one being the Caucasus up there, just north of which is where modern-day Chechnya and Ingushetia are.
Okay.
And to the south, you would find the main trade route that came out through Persia, across northern Iraq, northern Syria, and into Turkey. This was a... Is
that the present Kurdistan region? So we have a lot of...
Okay, let me just stop that right there and pull up another map and try to zoom in on that area that we're talking about, which is right over in here. This is the steppes area. Once the ice sheet is moved, it's just flat land intermixed with mountain ranges, but where these people were living. And so when we talk about the migration of these Caucasoid people coming out of this area over the mountains, and all of these mountain ranges all the way out through China. You got the Himalayas and all these mountain ranges here, because you got these tectonic plates that's crashing together right here, which creates them mountain ranges, and also the rift that's splitting this part of what's called Saudi Arabia. But in the ancient world, what is called Saudi Arabia in the ancient world is just Africa. As a matter of fact, right in this area right here is where Islam is was created. And on this coast, historically, as on the other coast of the Red Sea, which is the coast of Africa, African people have been indigenous to this area throughout time. And so, as a foundation for up in here, the highlands of Ethiopia, going over here, around the coastal areas where migrations generally happen along waterways so that people can travel, staying close to the coast where you have water and also seafood to eat. You have the Sumerian culture and civilization starting right here, and that is where Abraham is supposed to have come from, right in this area right here. But the oldest culture in this area is ancient Sumer, which is an African culture, and then you have the Levant right here. So and generally ancient Egypt, its northern borders were generally set right up here at the southern edge of Turkey, so that any outside forces coming in had to come in through this landmass, had to come through the forts and garrisons that the ancient Egyptians or Kemetans had set up. And so they not only controlled this area economically, politically, but militarily as well. And all of the ancient digs in this area come up with artifacts that relate to ancient Egypt. And of course, ancient Egypt was almost a continental civilization in terms of when you had the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. That's what you were talking about. Pharaohs who not only controlled this area, but all the way down to Ethiopia as well, in the unification of these two lands, almost a whole continent, as well as everything that was on both sides of the Red Sea, all the way across this desert land, as the Limba documents their history and places where they stopped all throughout this area. And if you go to this area today, the people that you'll find living in this area, for the most part, are still dark-skinned Africoid peoples. So you don't have, in the time period that we're talking about, you don't have no indigenous white people to this area. Remember now, here's Greece way over here, and then you would have Rome right over in here. But these don't come on the scene at the time period that we're talking about, because if we're talking about 1500 BC, you don't have a Greece yet. You have Caucasoid people who are migrating down from the north into this particular area. Not only are they migrating into this area, they are pushing out indigenous Africans who were along the southern coast of the Mediterranean on both sides. And that can be documented. And then this around, by the time they become what we would say civilized society, around 1000 BC, when the Africans of the Nile Valley had already gone up here and civilized them. You got documentation of that. And then later, 300 years, 332 BC, you got the Greeks coming into Egypt as conquerors. And then you have the Romans later around 32 BC, following their Greek cousins in and coming in as they are beginning to build the Roman Empire around 30 BC. And so prior to that time period, especially everything prior to 1500 BC, this whole Mediterranean area on both sides of the Mediterranean are controlled by Africoid people. And their civilizations and cultures are documented. And if you go there to do archaeological digs and everything, the oldest stuff you're going to find will come from these cultures. And then you'll begin to see these Caucasoid elements coming out of these areas here, out of Northern Europe, migrating southward into these southern areas. And when they come in, they bring in all kind of conflict and chaos. And so at least around 2500 BC, they're clearly recorded as coming down from the north into these areas. And at the earliest part of that timeline, they are not a major threat, but as their population begins to grow and swell, they then later come in as conquerors in these areas, and these populations begin to change to what they say are Semitic populations, which means simply that they are a mixture of these Caucasoid elements coming in and the Africard elements that were already indigenous there. So even if you go up in here to Syria, Lebanon today, if you go into the southern areas of both of those communities or cultures, you're going to find still dark-skinned African people. And I had a video, I don't know if I put it on the screen yet for today, but I'll have it for next week, where we have indigenous black people in that area, what they call black Palestinians, who are talking about that they were there before all these other people came in. Okay, the last thing I want to show you on the video, and then we'll open it up for further conversation and discussion, to try to go back to where we were looking at our scripts in our PowerPoint presentation, just to show you again what the scripts basically look like. When we start looking at the oldest scripts and dating them, here are those same images that we were looking at earlier, and as you go up here, this is 3,400 BC. The Egyptians are writing here. The Sumerians, part of the same African cultural background, they are writing. You come all the way down to Indus Valley culture and civilization, what we're going to talk about more next week. But Sumeria, again, you have these black people writing. By the time you get down here to 2400 BC, now you got the integration going on among the Akkadian civilization, but still the foundation, the core of intellect in this civilization is still African, although now you have a mixture of white folks coming in. And by the time you get down to these later periods right in here, you can see not only at the place that we were talking about in terms of the Levant, but the history recording is coming up about these white folks coming in by as far away as China and in India, among the Dravidian. All these people are writing, and many of them, since I have already indicated they were African people, they are writing in stone that these Aryan or Caucasoid invaders are now coming in. And they talk about these white folks coming in, what their character is, how they carry on, and basically all they're saying is they're bringing in death and destruction. Mm-hmm. They show up on your doorstep wanting something to eat, and the next thing you know, they're taking over, the whole communities as their populations get stronger and stronger. And then, as you can see, the scripts begin to change as they become integrated. They begin to change the scripts to something that basically fits their culture. This is another timeline. I want to make this PowerPoint available. Here, we go over here to the ancient Ethiopian script that we were talking about earlier, and then it shows an evolution as it evolved into later the Greek script, and then of course that gets passed down to the Romans. But when you look at these letters over here, this is modern Hebrew, ancient Hebrew. The modern Hebrew is changes that white folks have made to the scripts, but the older script would be the ancient Hebrew script, the scripts that you find right here. The letters that we just saw earlier, as white folks began to change them and turn them around, then they end up with these scripts right here. This is the ancient Ethiopian script that we were talking about earlier, that you will find carved in stone in Africa and no other places. Aramaic, we talked about that. This is the Ge'ez script. This is the same as that ancient Ethiopian script. If you look at the letter forms, you can see the relationship between the two. And we just go on to document that more in a graphic style, even among the Egyptians. This is the cursive script right here in the pictorial script. And if you look at the symbols of this script, they're definitely akin to the ancient Hebrew script. And then we put them up, side by side with each other, so you can see, what they look like, and you begin to trace these scripts back, and you can see that the earliest ones are those that are written by African people, and then the later ones are white folks' variations of these scripts as they move through time. Old Hebrew and Phoenician. Look at the scripts. And then look at these over here. Same basic script. But the names have been changed based on the conquerors who are now coming in. This is the Greeks now coming on the scene. And this would be older than this script. but you can see what they look like. The Greeks are nowhere writing at this period. And when they do come on the scene, this is the script that is passed down to them that they begin to modify over time to then become what we know as the Greek script right here. So it's just a matter of putting these things on the historical timeline as we move from Phoenician to Greek and early ancient Hebrew or Canaanite. We can see what script came before the other, how they actually look. The oldest being down on this area as you move down into this area, and the ones that we saw earlier were even older than these. But this is a part of the linguistics. So when we bring the linguistics in, look at the actual scripts, they tell a story that is also told when you line them up side by side, Old Hebrew, Aramaic, and Ancient Hebrew, and you look at this, it's not, white folks ain't writing in here yet. This is African scripts. And so I'm going to put this PowerPoint together. We'll share that with folks as we move on. Because once, okay, lights please. Once you begin to pull this evidence and then you look at them, here again now, we're not just dealing with one body of evidence, and we're saying very clearly that you can't use one body. You got to use different bodies of evidence, cross-reference them with each other. So when we take the archaeological evidence, the oldest fossils being found in that particular area, and they come up to be black people. Then we look at linguistics, the oldest scripts and languages that come out of that same area. They turn up to be black people. Then you do the DNA evidence in terms of the blood type, and you trace the Y and the mitochondrial DNA all the way back to the oldest sources, and they come up to be black. Now, you put all of those together, it paints a very clear picture. And so then all we have to do is look on the other side in terms of his story and see what can he pull together outside of you to tell the story that he's trying to tell. Well, the answer is very clear. When he stepped outside of your history, there is no history. So you cannot go to Europe and find these old scripts. You cannot go and find the fossil evidence. You cannot go there and find the DNA evidence because it is not there. Unless we're talking about a real prehistoric period where we're talking about early man, when we're dealing with Homo erectus, before we get to Homo sapiens sapien, yeah, there were Homo erectus migrations out of Africa into those areas, but all of the oldest fossils that you find, even in Europe, will be predated in Africa. So if you find Homo erectus skeletons, this is before modern man, in Europe, you'll find that the oldest Homo erectus skeletons are where? In Africa. In Africa. And then you can show very clearly a migration pattern of where Homo erectus came out of Africa and migrated into Europe. So when we move on to modern man, and then Homo erectus and Homo sapien, and then Homo sapiens sapien, here's white folks again coming up with all of these divisions. What we know for sure is that they all started in Africa. So if we're telling our own story, they're all what? Africans. So, but they'll put a scientific name on there, Homo erectus, Australopithecus, whatever. But they're all Africoid. They're all African realities, beings that come out, that evolve in Africa and then migrate out of Africa at different time periods. And white folks come up with these different names to try to confuse us, and they do a very good job of that. So who is to say when Africans were civilized? Homo erectus simply means that we're now walking upright. And so if we're walking upright as a human reality, who is to say what our social relationships were with one another? Based on what we know about African history is that we have always been a communal people. So Homo erectus, upright, how early he was working with other Homo erectus or other Africans to develop culture and what we say is civilized society, where African people realize that we stand a better chance dealing with nature by working what?
Together.
By working together. Yeah, I mean, it don't take very long, especially in Africa. You jump out there by yourself, and the lions and the hyenas and the other stuff will take care of you real quick. So we learned very early on, just for self-defense, that we need to work collectively in a group. So when we went out hunting, we went out as a group. Not just you get your little spirit, run out there by yourself. You might not never make it back. But we go out as a group. When we go out foraging, we go out as a group. We walk together, we stay together as a group. Matter of fact, we develop a culture where you cannot even identify the individual outside of the group. When the individual African would introduce himself, they would first call the group's name. I am Igbo, and my name is so-and-so, so-and-so, but I belong to Igbo, this culture or civilization. And so when you're born into the culture, it is understood in your early social development that you are born into a family that belongs to a community, that belongs to a nation state, and we all work collectively together. African communalism was the first human socialization process. Before we got to where we are now, where we have been divided and by white people, and now we all walk around thinking that we're here by ourselves, and me, myself, and I. That's white folks stuff. That's not the African way. And so when we're trying to go back to our cultural foundation, and we will never be able to defeat the forces that line up against us, trying to defeat them, you know, as individuals. You take on the battle by yourself, and you fight the battle by yourself. And you will see it all the time, brothers and sisters out there trying to take on the whole white culture and civilization by themselves. And white folks deal with them very thoroughly. That's why when you call the police, not one white police car show up. How many show up? Say at least four or five, all in there on you, because they're scared of you. And they're very scared of you when you start working collectively together. But if you just one disgruntled, upset, mad black man or black woman, they know how to handle you. You know, they all come on you together, throw you to the ground, put their foot in the back of your neck, put the handcuffs on you, throw you on in the car, and put you in jail. That's how they do it. Looking at one of the videos I downloaded from the internet in New York, and they was talking about how the police, how New York is becoming more and more a police state. And now it's not only driving while black, but it's walking while black. And so with the video, they were saying, and they had the guy actually talking to the police before they went out. And they had to meet a certain quota. So the only way they could meet the quota is that they just had to go and stop people on the street and frisk them, go through their pockets and everything, and lock them up. Even if the case don't stick, lock them up, just because they're going to get so many people locked up, to put so much terror in the community so that you don't even want to come out of your house no more. And they were talking about how 90% of the incarceration of black people have basically been around things that are nonviolent drug offenses. He had a nickel bag, or got caught with a joint, you know, something like that. And then they're going to lock you up, give you all kind of time, and also not only give you time, but you get also a felony, which now means that you can't vote. So they're talking about over 13,000 or so brothers right now, I mean, it's probably a higher number than that, who cannot vote because they have felonies. And so people are thinking that it's by accident. No, it's all part of the plan. And so as the governor went into New York, that was a part of what he called public safety. They had the police come out there, and the same thing is happening in London. The same thing is happening where black people all over the world are living in a police state in order to keep us in check and under control. So where you have in America, you got 6 million black men in America, yet we rep and 130 something million white folk, and we represent 50% of the people who are incarcerated. Black men, who are only 6% of the total U.S. population, represent 50% of those people who are incarcerated in American prisons. And I got a whole nother thing I'm going to share with y'all on this whole thing about private prisons, which gets deeper still. But let me stop right there, because I've shared with you a lot of information, especially as it relates to the connection between ancient Egypt or ancient African Nile Valley culture and the story of the evolution or the beginning of Christianity, Judaism, that of course right now all over the world has a white face on it. So not just going, as we try to take black Christian nationalism into Africa, you got the big, in African communities, Atapoka can attest to that. You got these big old white Jesus signs all over the place. And then African people who are trying to get into spiritual arena and worship and everything, going into the churches just like we are here. Remember, it started there, worshiping these white Jesus. Have totally abandoned our own spiritual systems and have adopted those of the oppressor. And now we're trying to be more white than even the white folks are. And so let us have some further discussion as we begin to wrap up here this evening. Some other comments?
Yeah,
My brother.
I just wanted to add what you was talking about, how they want to police us. So 2 weeks ago, right here in Atlanta downtown, I don't know if you all know about it. You can go to Creative Growth magazine, I think the last week's issue. Governor Deal sicked I'll just say it. He put the state police on the homeless right there on the ledge. I don't know if you all know, there's an area right there at the State House that they call it the ledge, where a lot of homeless people hang out, because that's where they get a lot of help from, churches and things. Governor Deal sicked the state police on them. They had some sort of event out there where they was going to try to help a lot of the homeless, but for whatever reason, the governor sent the state police on them and wanted to clear them out. Now, I think it's like 50 of them got places to go. The people served them and got them places to go where they could stay. But the rest of them, they left them out there. But the governor sent the state police on them to get rid of them. Now, the question I ask is, the homeless has been there on the ledge downtown, around the State House, around City Hall for decades. It's not like they all of a sudden showed up. Why is it so important to get rid of them now? Why is it a quote-unquote PR problem?
Well, one of the things, and I want to say this, but then I want to go back to our topic, is that one of the number one money-making industries in America today is prisons.
That's right.
Competing with oil. And I think they're about to take over from oil. It's a multi-billion-dollar money-making industry. So that's the reality. Let me try to take the discussion back to the concept that we were originally discussing as it relates to this connection between African spiritual systems in the Nile Valley and that which is oftentimes associated as particularly something that comes from white people in terms of Christianity, Judaism, and as well as Islam. Any comments or questions as it relates to that, based on what we've seen? My brother.
Well, I know, hearing this information makes me feel good about myself. I see, I went to go see the Tuskegee Airmen. You see that, and it makes you feel good about yourself to see positive black role models, so on and so forth. Now, how are we going to kind of like neutralize some of the negative history that they're putting out there when, say, like the Tuskegee Airmen, that film, as far as I understand, it's like this guy had to come out of his pocket. Hollywood said, no, we don't want to fund this, and now it's out there. I guess they did pretty well at the box office because there was a lot of buzz around it. But seeing that type of positive energy makes me, or I would assume everybody, all black people, feel good about themselves. But of course, we don't have enough of it. So how do we take this knowledge that you were sharing with us today and put it out to the masses to make everybody feel good? I'm just trying to find out how are we going to like make this a massive message across all black people?
Okay. Very clearly. First of all, each one must what?
Teach one.
At least one. So that the information that you get from this process, have that discussion, make a commitment to pass it on to somebody else.
There you go.
We provide the People's Library so that you don't have to just listen to what Wally Moore Latunji say, but we got a series of master teachers who give you even further evidence based on what we're sharing in the class. So sometimes in the face of trying to pass on this new information, brothers and sisters will put up a fight, a big wall. Will be ready to get rough with you, some folks will, about this. And so we don't want to get into a confrontation with our brothers and sisters. So we're trying to find a way that we can pass on the information in a non-threatening kind of way. I think the DVDs is the best way to do it. Okay. Because you can leave the DVD with them and just say, look, just check this out. And so you will go, and even though they might not, want to, after a while they keep looking at that this over there, looking at that this over there. Let me just see, And once you look at the information, it's hard as hell to try to act like you didn't see it and you did not hear, this new information. So then that struggle becomes an internal struggle. Right. Now you're fighting with yourself. Right. The black Jesus is fighting with the white Jesus, The black, our story, is fighting with the white, his story. And so it generally tends to develop a need to further verify it or deny it in some way. And so if they get involved in that process, then more information will become available to them. Another way, of course, is to replicate this process. We don't want this African history class to be the only one in Atlanta. We need classes like this in every black community where we are. And so a part of that is also providing you with the resource information and materials so that you can go and do the same thing that I'm doing. Exactly. Because I came into it the same way you came into it, somebody else. As a matter of fact, that brother on that picture right there was the one in here doing what I'm doing when I came here 20 years ago. And because they were able to pass on to me the curriculum handouts, the DVDs, and I could go home and further educate myself and then share it with my family members first, because that's the smallest institution. Right. And sometimes the biggest fight is going to be right there in your house, As I tell the story, I remember when I took my mama white Jesus down off the wall, man, and we had a big old fight. And boy, if you don't put my Jesus, back up on this wall, and I'm like, wait a minute, mama, let me share. So that was a big struggle right there. But as time went on, just providing black people with more information that they have not been exposed to, we began to weigh and balance the information on our own, and we began to draw the conclusions based on the analysis that is generally a correct conclusion. The problem is that we've been given his story all the time, all since we've been here. And our story has never really been told. So let us then tell our story in whatever way that we can so that you have both sides, and then let people make their own decisions. Finally, as far as I'm concerned, black people coming together like we was before. History shows very clearly, whenever we are working collectively together, we do great things. It's as simple as that. When we separate from each other and we start trying to do individualistic kinds of things, our communities, our nations fall apart because we are not connected. We have all kinds of talents and skills within us just in this room. And we talk about Atlanta, and then we talk about this country, and then we talk about the whole world. We got a lot of black people out there that once we take the chains off our minds, we can change our reality overnight. Overnight. So we just got to share this information, and I'm very excited about what's happening right now on the internet. And I do take it with a grain of salt because I don't think it's going to last for long. No. And I know already that they got bills in the Congress where they're trying to shut down this internet. Too much information is getting out. Yeah. Every one of the clips that I showed you today, I downloaded from the internet. So we're talking about 5 to 7 minute clips. Some of them may not even be that long. But it's information that now has, in a flood, been uploaded to the internet now that everything is going with video. YouTube is going with video, Microsoft is going with video, Facebook is going to be video. Video is that's the way of the world right now in terms of digital technology. So all of those scholars, those brothers and sisters in different corners and pockets of the world who had spent their whole life doing this research and may have been able to put something in a video format, but it didn't really get outside of that little local community. Now it's uploaded to the internet and everybody can have access to it. For the last 4 weeks, I've been just downloading video like a madman. I ran across one clip that says that in the last 2 months, more video has been uploaded to YouTube than all the video that has been shown on the major public TV stations since the 1950s. Can you believe that? All the television programming since the 1950s. more video footage has been uploaded just in the last 2 months on YouTube, because everybody's now, anybody who had a little camcorder, who's trying to tell their story, putting their stuff up there, And then a lot of the stuff, I would say, where people had more money for better cameras and stuff like that, that may, sometimes you catch it on the History Channel if you just happen to be there at that time, at that spot, and they don't never show it again. Right. That kind of stuff is getting uploaded to the internet. So I'm working on right now over 460 video clips that I'm going to bring in to share with you. And I'm going to start out with files where you can view them on your laptops, and then I'll convert them over to DVDs that we can add to the library that we have right here. So over here, you got an hour, maybe 2 hour lecture. The new stuff is going to be coming in shorter, connections. Maybe like the little clips that we show, maybe 5-7 minutes. And as you go through like 25 or 30 of them in one particular area, you pretty much got the whole story about what's happening in that particular area. Brother Zach wanted to add to that in terms of how we share this information.
Yeah, I saw one of them. Something that meant a lot to me was the person that said we should do things in a vertical way and not a horizontal way. I mean, there's a lot of things that goes on in our life, in our community, that really ain't got nothing to do with us in terms of our perspective on things. So one thing that we should do as people is deal with things as they pertain to us, and then when all this other stuff that we can complain about, like my brother was saying, but they ain't gonna do that. I mean, there's only so much they're gonna do for us anyway, so we gotta do for ourselves. So the wheel, in a sense, of reinventing the wheel, we can look at our past, our history, and see who we was and what we did. And for y'all that are teachers, y'all know about setting goals and objectives. So you said everything I wanted to say. When in terms of doing things, rather than one person trying to fix the whole world, why don't everybody do a little piece? I wonder how many activities a person can create using the information that we've got here in terms of family, friends, and relationships.
Yeah. One of the things that is definitely clear is that the standard public educational system is not telling this story. And they will not tell this story because it is not in their interest to do so. So we have to tell the story in formats like this in terms of our own history classes or study groups. And as we use the internet also as a tool to help share more and more of this information, then more and more brothers and sisters' consciousness will be raised. Then once our consciousness is raised, the next step is then we got to get actively involved. Because you can get deep and deep and deep with this stuff, and if you're still sitting around, then ain't nothing still going to change. You just deep, and you go around and tell people how deep you are and all that. But if you ain't came together with some brothers and sisters to try to then create the institutions that we need to survive on, then nothing is going to change. We're looking at some statistics as it relates to the Obama administration. Right now they're saying generally unemployment is about 9% in the country, but among black people it's 17%. Among black males it's even higher. And so when they pull all the numbers collectively, they're now even saying even about 50% of Africans in America are unemployed. And it has grown, it has actually doubled since Obama has been elected, and he never really focuses on anything that's black. He don't talk about black unemployment. When he talks about unemployment, he talks about white unemployment. But even in general, he calls it American unemployment, but it's white, it's the 9%. He ain't said nothing about the 17% unemployment rate among black people, which is the highest, among black men, which is the highest of any people in the country, higher than everybody else. And what does that mean to our communities, how it will impact? So we need to be able to share that information as well and realize that when you see all of this activity among white people and how they are still upset and angry about Obama being in power, and if they are given the choice where they're going to take things to erase whatever he has done, that's ought to be a red light for black people to realize that the United States government is not going to do anything to address the problems of black people in this country. Where are they putting the money? They are spending almost twice as much money on penal system that they are on the educational system. They were showing some statistics where it costs almost $30,000 a year to keep a brother locked up. But then they can send you to college for like $9,000 a year. White folks are making a conscious decision. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to understand that dynamic. That's basic money right there. It takes me $30,000 to keep you locked up, and or I could pay $9,000 and send you, to college for a year. So they're making a conscious decision. We'd rather spend the $30,000 because when they're spending the $30,000, who are they paying? They're paying themselves.
And they get free labor.
So they're setting up these private prisons now where corporations, and I'll share some video with you on that later. Corporations now, one of their biggest things that they're getting into is privatization of prisons.
Right.
And so the corporation owns the prison, sets up the prison, develops the prison, and they come into your city and say this prison is going to create what? Jobs. And so they get the community all into the job thing, but once the prison is up and running, who's in the prison? We are in the prison.
And we
now,
got jobs.
that the prison is privately owned, hear me? The prison is privately owned by a corporation. So you're really not talking to an individual. You're talking to a capitalist corporate entity whose face you can never see. And they're just in what? Business. Okay? So what is their incentive to let you out on good behavior when the state is paying them $30,000 a year to keep you locked up? Y'all feel me?
More money.
So it ain't going to happen from within side. It's going to happen from what we create. Organizations like the Shrine of Black Madonna, where we are building powerful black people, all over this country and now in Africa. Right now, one of the biggest things happening among black Christian nationalism is in the continent of Africa in Liberia. Last year, we started our first Shrine of Black Madonna on the continent, and in January of last year, and by almost mid-year, that one church on the continent in Liberia has sprung into 3, and now it's working on a 4th one. And so we took the concept of black Christian nationalism, all of what we share with you here in this class, to the motherland. We found that there was an organization of black people who were looking for a sponsorship for their church. And so somebody referred them to us. And so we had to write them and say, well, we not your average church. You sure you want us? Because folks be running, there's no black nationalists, get away from them. They're always black, 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 And so we sent responded to them and asked them, are you sure it's us you want? And so we let them know what our philosophy is black nationalism. We go all the way back to the African ancestors when we deal with spiritual concepts. Our program is about building a nation of for black power and everything like that. And they said, oh yes, where has this been? Say, yeah, we want y'all to sponsor us. And so when we did, and we sent resources and tools to help get the first church up and going, and then we're also developing schools along with the churches so we can teach the young people there. The neighboring community said, what got them up and going like this? Said, there's something called black Christian nationalism. And they said, well, we want some of that too. And so it's another church spin off. And then the government, where we have, what is always proven to be the best leadership we can have is the black woman. She's the president of the government. When she saw this kind of activity going on, she was like, well, how can I help y'all help us? And what do y'all need? So she wants to give us more land. And so I'm just trying to say, when you come, it don't have to be us. We would like for you to come and look at our program because it speaks for itself. What we have put together in the span of 58 years now is millions of dollars worth of resources and institutions. So we're educating our own children with our Keeperland program. We got bookstores and culture centers in every place that we are. So brothers and sisters who come seeking knowledge and information, they have a place where they can come and be enlightened. We also control the politics of the community that surround us. We have a relationship with an institution we call the Black Slate. that tries to hold politicians accountable to the needs of the black community. We're creating institutions where we house, clothe, and feed ourselves. The Beulah Farm Project, we own lock, stock, and barrel 4,000 acres of farmland in Abbeville, South Carolina, which is just the beginning of what we envision as a network of black farms that feed black people. And so these are the things that we do, and the story is all on the walls right here. But there are other black organizations that are moving down the same path. So we always say, well, you know, once you come into consciousness and you understand what's going on, then choose some organization to become a part of and dedicate your skills and talents to the growth and development of that organization. That's the way we see it. Outside of that, we are left up with the same wish, hopes, and dreams that someday white folks going to work it out and they're going to treat us better than they have been treating us. We said, to hell with that. Let us come together. You got all kinds of talents and skills. Let us pull these talents and skills together and create what we need for ourselves and maintain it and develop it for our children so we can leave them a legacy greater than, well, we hope the white man treats you better than they treated us. What kind of legacy is that to leave behind for our children? So that would be my answer to that question. Any other questions you might have before we wrap up? Because I got some special stuff I want to share with some of you who might be ready. Anybody else? Question, comment? Now, go ahead, bro.
When you talk about Jesus, and they said in 2,000 years ago, you say the Caucasian wasn't in there. So if we looked at Jesus, I know we're going to consider him non-white. I mean non-white. Are we looking at a darker complexion or olive color, or what color we pretty much have in mind?
Okay. Of course, I would say any of that or all of that. One of the realities that we do understand is that there's no way possible that a Caucasoid white man could have come out of that particular area with that type of theology at that period of time. First of all, there were no white people indigenous to that area 2,000 years ago. And that's very clear once we developed the historical timeline. Then we began to put white people on that timeline. And we start out with what they say is their oldest civilization. And they always tell you about the Greeks. The Greeks. They give you so much Greeks that you go and burn Greek symbols on your arms and your legs and pledge Greek because you want to be associated with the Greeks, not knowing that your ancestors taught the Greeks. If you go to the first Greek historian, all of this is documented, is Herodotus. And Herodotus says in his own words, we, Greeks, learned everything we knew at the feet of the Africans. So we document them at 1000 BC as a quote-unquote civilized culture on the historical timeline. Then we simply ask the question, can you point to any other white culture or civilization prior to that that would be what we would consider civilized? Had some law and order, was writing their own history. And when we ask that question, people think long and hard, but they can't come up with any. So we write that down on the timeline. And then we ask the question, well then, can we come up with any black culture or civilization prior to 1000 BC? And so the answer comes back a resounding yes. If we just look at ancient Egypt or Nile Valley culture and civilization, we got the Old Kingdom 3500 BC. That's what, 2,500 years before the Greeks built the pyramids, which means you in order to build a pyramid, you got to have a mastery of what?
Math,
calculus, physics, calculus, mathematics, science, geometry, astrology, all of those things, engineering, hydraulics, all of those things. And then we show you, because white folks will step in right quick at that point and say, well, black people couldn't have did this. Somebody from where? Outer space. Somebody from outer space came down and did this for you. But when we go inside the pyramid, we got all these black people all over the place, on the walls and everything. And then we take that history all the way back to pre-dynastic time, which is even earlier than what they will want to recognize in terms of ancient Egypt. And we see pyramid building. We see the development. When we look at Imhotep, the master genius, when he started out building the first pyramid, starting out with what they call mastabas, these just little square blocks. And then he stacked the block on top of the block on top of the block, and then filled in the sides, and then you see the foundation for a pyramid building. So we said, well, let's go in, if white folks want to be Egyptians, let's go in Europe somewhere and find the foundation for pyramid building. You're not going to find it nowhere in Europe because they lied. And so we put that on the timeline, and it becomes clear then that when we move into that area that is called the Levant, and document the migrations of human populations into that area, which we can do, we begin to see that you don't have Greeks and Romans coming into that area until around, as conquerors, until around 332 BC, where the Greeks come in to help the Africans get the Persians off their back. We document that. The Greeks document that. The Persians document that. So everybody at that particular period of time, yeah, the Greeks came in to this area at this particular time, and they were fighting against the Persians, and then they won. And when they won and looked around, they decided to stay there and set up shop rather than to go back home. So we got the Greeks coming in at that period. But that's 332 BC. The story of black nation Israel comes up at 1000 BC. So that's at least 700 years before the Greeks even get there. That story is already being told. The foundation for Christianity in that area is already fully developed by that time, although it is developed thousands of years earlier than that. So once we take the white folks out the picture, then the question is, well, who else could it have been? It wasn't no Japanese or no Chinese. The only other people that was there was you. And then we look at the biblical references. The biblical references say, hair on lamb's wool, feet burnt like brass in the oven. Right. Now, if you get a white man out of that, we need to send you and get you checked out. Okay? Then when we look at the actual stories, the basic moral components of the belief system, the crucified Savior, the resurrection story, the virgin birth story, all of those we see thousands of years earlier in ancient Egypt before they show up in the area of the Levant. And so when we start marshaling all this evidence together, it becomes clearer and clearer and clearer that white folks have lied and they are misrepresenting the truth, but that should not be a shock to any of you.
They still do.
They still do it to this day. And they use mass media in order to be able to do that. But modern technology has now evolved to the state where bro man got a camera over here. And now he's taking pictures and beginning to tell his own story. You got a camera, I got one. Now black folks are beginning to tell our own story. Movie making is catching on like fire on the continent. In Nigeria and other places, for the first time, the black man and woman can now tell our story. And it's bringing a whole new humanity to the world. Things, the way we deal with things, the way we think about things is totally different from the way Caucasoid people do and think about the stories that we come up with. So it's bringing a whole new renaissance, if you will, to the world. So in the face of all of that, it should be very clear wherein lies the truth, and then what we should be about in terms of trying to continue to push that to the next level. And I would say, get on that internet if you got access. Get on there, go to the YouTube, and whatever you think you want to know, type it in there, and watch all of the videos. Just start flooding down like that. You spend all night, and I got bags under my eyes to prove it. Just download. Sometimes I get the file halfway downloaded, and then it fell. Now I got to go back and spend another 10 minutes trying to get it back down. But I'm confident that I better get as much of this stuff as I can right now before they put some kind of locks or constraints on it, because it's new right now. Y'all know how it was when you first had an opportunity to download music and you just on the wild, just download, and then they came up with now you got to pay $1 or something like that. So this same kind of thing is possibly going to happen with these videos. But the cat is out the bag. Yep. And how you going to put the cat back in the bag? Cat ain't gonna scratch you all up and everything. He's not gonna get back in the bag. So as all of this new information comes out, we hope to raise the consciousness of brothers and sisters. But as we do, that's going to tighten up the conflict between the haves and the have-nots. So white folks are getting ready for that, and they are investing millions of dollars into prisons all over this country. This country has more prisons than any other country already. And most of those who are incarcerated are us, are disproportional to our percentage in the population. Once we begin to see and understand those statistics, it's going to make you mad. It's going to make you upset. And that breeds revolutionary change. Whether we are confronting the institutions that are denying us, and some of you would rather take on that battle. You rather go and fight the public school system to make them put this into the classroom so that your children can see it. Good luck. That's going to be a battle that you will have to wage. Others will come to the decision, maybe we need to start our own schools. So we have some independent charter schools that we start. That's less of a fight. And then we bring this teaching and education to our own children and enlighten them. Now that's the role we choose. And of course you have to choose whichever way you decide to go. But with this level of consciousness, this new awakening, you just can't sit idly by like you was before when you didn't know. You got to at least start doing something. I say start with trying to get more and more information and then sharing that information. And as the consciousness rise, you will come to a decision sooner or later. And white folks are kind of pushing us to some decisions that we've been ready to make. But if we don't do something soon, y'all know what the situation is going to be like. Okay, let me, my sister, I have to get you.
Yes, thank you. Shalom, everyone. With reference to the brother's question about Jesus, the color, I would just like to refer you to a book called The Origins of Christianity by Walter Williams. He's a brother in Chicago. He has a museum there as well. And it's a well-documented book. It shows you that this Jesus persona was complete figment of the Greek and Roman imagination, because they wanted us to worship the Roman leaders, you know, as a Messiah, and we refused to do so. So they created their own at the Council of Nicaea and many other councils that they had. But this book is an excellent book that will give you all the information you know on the origin of the name. It was Greek and Roman, and he was no spiritual, you know, ancient leader anywhere. So I just wanted to give him that information.
Let me just add to that, and if you follow this, if you will. One of the things that we believe, first of all, let's deal with the letter J, and we talked about that often, that it was not until around the 15th century that the letter J came into the English language. Looking at the linguistics that we were looking at earlier, if you notice that there was no J. So if there was no J in ancient time, then there could not have been a Jesus, a Joshua, a Judah, or anything that started with a J. It had to be called something else. Now, work with me here now. At every point that the Greek, Roman, or foreign rulers came in, they changed the language, the names and concepts of things into their own language. So whatever African people was calling it, the Greeks called it something else. The Romans called it something else. Okay? So all the names have been changed, as I always say, to protect the guilty. Not the innocent, to protect the guilty. But if you have foreign troops, first of all, we know that the history documents the Greeks coming into this area. And then they are followed by the Romans. That's clearly, unquestionably documented. So if they come into this area and they're having some conflict, which is natural, any foreign forces coming in to oppress a people, you're going to get some kind of what? Resistance. Some kind of revolution. Somebody's going to be fighting because these foreign forces are in here trying to run our stuff, and we don't like them, and we want them to leave. So you're going to have revolution going on. The history of the same period talks about the rebellions and revolution going on in the area. The Greek talks about the people in that area rebelling against Greek authority. The Romans talking about the people in that area rebelling against Roman authority. And so what they are basically saying to them is that the biggest problems we're having with these people that we are conquering, and I'm telling you they're black people, do the research, you'll find for yourself, is that they recognize that now we are militarily in control. And so militarily, with our soldiers and legions and everything, we are running things. Anybody starting in trouble, we put them down immediately. But the people are still holding on to what?
Their culture, the way
their culture, which produced their spiritual system, their religious ideas. They are still holding on to that. Matter of fact, that's all they got to hold on to. The way they believe about God. And so it becomes a conflict because what they believed about God meant that they needed to put their money and resources into rebuilding their own spiritual temples, as opposed to giving that money to who?
Somebody else.
To the Greeks and the Romans. And so the Romans come up with very clearly, they say, look, we don't care who you want to worship, whatever, but when the tax collector come around, all your money better come to Caesar.
Show me the money.
And if you don't pay your taxes, it's going to be what? Hell to pay. And so you got that conflict that is going on right there. If you look at the spiritual system, we're not talking about one Jesus. We're talking about every brother and or sister who rose up against Roman oppression to try to throw off their oppressor, to try to not go along with the white man's program. We say that they were Jesuses, or male or female, whatever you want to call them. They were the revolutionary indication of the people still trying to rise up and protest control by another group of people. So in the nation, we say that Jesus is born again in every generation. So whether you call him Yahshua or whatever name that you might give this personality, you could call him Moses, you could call him Malcolm, you could call him Martin, you could call him Nat Turner, you could call him millions of names of black people who rose up against white oppression and tried to fight against it. We do the same. So we see him not as some special, separate and apart from the reality of the black world, but any brother or sister who rose up to fight against oppression. And at that time, you had a number of people who were fighting against Roman oppression. Now, I'm almost through with this. Also among that oppressed people in that particular area, you develop what's called a messianic expectation. The Messiah complex. The idea of the Messiah is that God will send us a what? A Savior, a Redeemer. Somebody who will lead the way to liberate us from these Greeks and these Romans. And so it becomes an expectation among the people. And even the people begin to name their children names that mean Savior, Redeemer, Liberator. Just like we would name our children Malcolm or Martin or other names that venerate the liberators of our people in the past. That was happening in that particular region as well. And so it is that messianic expectation that always led up to somebody who's ready to lead the revolution. And so they lead a little revolution and the Romans kill them, and somebody else pop up on the other side of town and say, I am the one, I'll lead the people to freedom. And the Romans, crucify them and nail them up. They say at one time they had 2,000 black people nailed up on crosses around the city of Jerusalem, just to show black people then that if you rebel against Rome, this is what's going to happen to you. And those corpses would stay up there until they rotted and the meat fell off the bone, smell in the whole area. They said you could smell death, miles and miles away. But that was Rome letting you know that there's a price to pay for freedom. But that never did stop black people from rebelling. So from that day all the way to this day, there have been some black people that God has touched in the womb that will not be satisfied with what's going on. And sometimes those black people feel like they are something wrong with them. Why I can't just get along just like all the other black people? Why God touched me to want to do something, to want to fight against this oppression? So if you feel the way I'm going with that story, you can understand the whole concept. Now, of course, when the Greeks and the Romans come in, they changed these ideas and concepts. In other words, they cannot come up with a Jesus without your story. The Osirian drama, the first crucified Savior, Osiris, and his wife Isis, Isis and Haru, the first virgin birth story. Isis and Haru, the mother and son. When you take those images back in terms of Mary and the baby Jesus, the oldest one you're going to find is Isis and Haru, or Set and Haru. That's right, Set. Those you find worshipped by white people before they start trying to depict themselves in that image. You feel what I'm saying? Before the Greeks come up with a Jesus, they are worshiping Isis and Haru. You got the Isis cults in Greek society. Greek white people worshiping black Isis and her baby child Haru that becomes Mary and Jesus. It's all documented. I ain't just making it up. You can go back to Greek culture and you can see the cults there. You can see them. You can see the vessels and the ornaments that they developed with these black faces on it that they were worshiping. You can go into the Vatican right now today and see the Pope kneeling down to a black Madonna. You got black Madonnas all throughout Europe, in Poland, Czechoslovakia, in Russia, all of them. Why would these white people be worshiping a black Madonna if there was no association with that? I ask you that question. So yeah, they take that concept and paint it white, just like Michelangelo did. It's all documented. But if you go back to the essence of the story and do your historical research, you can see that this came from you. All of these concepts and ideas came out of ancient Egypt and can be clearly seen practiced among white people, long before this time that we are at right now. I tend to get on the roll sometimes, I don't know when to stop. But let me just leave you with that. And I want to, while I'm passing the donation bucket around, because that's what keeps this class going, your donations allow us to be able to have more handouts or less handouts, more DVDs or less DVDs. So whatever you give, please keep that in mind. And we're about to embark upon a new campaign to raise money for the history class in hopes of ways that we can take the class to the internet and maybe spin off some other classes with those of you who would like to do that. And so I'll have that campaign that I'll present to you next week. And you can take any part of it, from just taking one of the flyers and help us run some copies off, or pushing the e-flyer through your email contacts, let other brothers and sisters know that the class is happening. We are always collecting donations we want to get some new audio-visual material so we can have brighter images. When we're showing this particular process, we need duplicators so we can create more DVDs. Greater process to being able to share this with you. We can use blank DVDs, DVD minus R, so we can record the story and share it with you for a little or nothing. So if you have access to that, that you can donate, whether it's material contributions or financial, we can use both of them. If you can give us one ream of paper, that will print some handouts. Or a case of paper. Those kind of things help us keep the class going. And of course, the curriculum and everything that we have already created, we're willing to share with those of you who God has touched to want to, become involved in the same type of process so that you can be teaching in whatever other venue that is open and available to you. Now, finally, with that being said,